All right, well, that recording is our cue to get started. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on David's YouTube channel shortly after the presentation. So you can go back and watch it again or share it with your colleagues. So again, just want to welcome you all and thank you so much from all of us on David's team for joining us for today's webinar. David has some really great content on the workplace as a platform for self-development. As many of you may know, David has more than 40 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, and advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. He is a best-selling author and well-respected thought leader in the leadership community. David is so passionate about helping people connect with the most authentic versions of themselves and seeing the world transform one authentic person at a time. Whether he's leading an academy, hosting a webinar, speaking in front of a crowd, or sharing his thought through his written words, David is inspired and fulfilled by the work that he does. So thanks again for being part of it. It is always inspiring and encouraging to see so many leaders that are committed to learning and growing and showing up as the most authentic versions of themselves. So without further ado, I will pass this over to David.
Kristen, thank you. Thank you always for your energy and your spirit. I know you had difficulty getting on. I hope that that wasn't the case for others, but thank you for showing up. You're accountable and you inspire me and everybody in our team and everybody in our community. So thank you. Thank you everybody for coming today. I know I always say that our demand for our time, especially online, is very great these days. And for you to take an hour and to be with me today means a great deal to me. It truly does. So here's how it works. If you're not familiar with the format, I'm going to talk for about an hour, give you some content, help you reflect, and then I will stay on for another half an hour afterwards. Some people I know have to jump off right on the hour. But if you would like to stay on, I welcome you. To me, it's sometimes the best part of the webinar is to have us connect and share stories and ask questions and share reflections for that half an hour after I'm finished. So with that in mind, I will proceed. Let me give you a focus of what we're going to do in the next hour. It was very difficult for me to describe in words what the benefit would be to turning your workplace into a classroom. So I'm going to do three things. First of all, I'm going to give you a rationale for why I believe this is fundamental. And folks, I hope that you will allow yourself to just be fully present here and let go of the compulsion that I think we all share today to multitask and just allow yourself to be very present. I don't know what you've got going on in your life, and I certainly have no judgment about it. But I'm going to be very personal with you today. I believe that this message is very personal. We're going to spend probably, if we live that long, we'll spend up to 70,000 hours of our life in this thing called work. And as Dr. Phil would say, how is that working for you? So, work is far too important to just get by. It's a great opportunity for learning. So I'm going to give you a rationale for why I believe it's really fundamental to our lives to turn our workplace into a classroom. And really what we're going to talk about is turning your life into a classroom, but I'm going to put it in the context of work for the sake of some boundaries around this session. And so number two, we're going to take you on some reflections. I'm going to share with you my own story of what work has taught me over the last 40 years, what I have learned actually since I started in university. I'm going to start back when I was in university, and I'm going to give you my story, hopefully that you will reflect on your story. And then I want to give you some practical strategies of how you can make this stuff real. Okay, let's get into the content. I'm going to start with a fundamental question. I always like to start with what's the end in mind. So what is the purpose of a life? I'm going to start with a very fundamental question. As Mark Twain said, there's the two most important days in your life are the days you're born and the day that you find out why. So all of the rationale for why I'm going to talk about the workplace as a classroom stems and is built on the foundation of understanding what the fundamental purpose of life is. So I'm going to have three premises here. And that is, the first premise is that the purpose of a life is to learn and to make the world better by what you learned. So essentially, that's a universal principle for all of us that I'd like to start by having you reflect on. Now, if your purpose in life does not reflect that, then I'm probably not going to bring a lot of value to this presentation for you today. In other words, if you think that the purpose of life is just to come and have a good time, and spend as much money and make as much money as you can, it's likely going to be a little bit of a values misalignment, and I probably won't create a lot of value for you. So just reflect. I hope that there's some sense of alignment between that statement and how you live your life. So we're here to learn, and we're here to make the world better as a result of what you learned. We are, folks, hardwired to learn. We would not survive as a species if we did not come into this world with a brain that is hardwired to learn. We are constantly learning all the time. We are learning so much that we don't even know that we're learning. And we probably learn, I should know this, but we probably learn more in the first year than we learn the rest of our lives. So here's a question I'd like you to ask. What methods do you use to learn in your life? And typically when I ask this question, here's the list that I get. I read books, I take courses, I go to workshops, I listen to podcasts, I go to listen to YouTube videos like this one. I go to TED, listen to TED Talks. Okay, so this is a good list. And no question, you're going to learn from all of these sources. But there's a basic premise here, and that is that we go somewhere to learn. We are taught that you go to class to learn, you go to school to learn, you read a book to learn. And these are all great modes of learning. But I'm going to suggest that these typical examples miss another opportunity to learn. And here's what I mean. Life is our classroom, and adversity is one of our best instructors. What if we worked from the premise that we don't always have to go somewhere else? I'm not discouraging you from reading good books and learning in good books. I'm not discouraging you from listening to TED Talk. Oh, those are all good methods. But I'm going to have you think differently, perhaps, that life itself is a classroom. And oftentimes we don't think of it in those terms. We think that learning is somewhere else. And so I'm going to start with the premise. As my good friend Don Campbell says, who I think is on the call today, if you want to make big changes in your life, you want to make small changes in your life, change the way that you do things. If you want to make big changes in your life, change the way that you see things. So the first thing I'd like you to invite you to do is to see life as a continual classroom. And you're not just separating life from learning, that I'm going to go and learn somewhere. I'm going to go to a webinar and learn something. Well, hopefully you will learn something, but my invitation is that you begin to see your life as a classroom and adversity as one of your best teachers. As Mark Nepo, the great poet, said, as bees are drawn to nectar, as animals are compelled to migrate, as plants are drawn to grow toward an inch of light, we are drawn to what we need to learn. We are continually pulled toward what we need to learn. And I am going to submit for your consideration that we're actually pulled toward adversity, because that is one of our best instructors in life. My purpose is to help people connect with their true nature and express it consciously in their work and their life. Connect with your authentic self so that you can amplify your impact in the world. And those of you many of you on this call have been through a lot of my programs and understand this is the central core of my work, is this whole notion of deepening your life and connecting with your true nature. The authentic journey defined is embracing a time of great difficulty, allowing the pain to break us open so that a stronger, wiser, and kinder self can emerge. Through the lens of authenticity, adversity is viewed as something wanting to be born. So here's a question for you. Next time you face adversity, instead of resisting it, ask yourself this question. What is it that is wanting to be born? It's a basic premise that I work from if you want to be authentic and if you want to deepen your authentic life. So here's the premise here too, is that sometimes we hide. It is a fundamental biological response that when we get a foreign element, when something comes different into our life, we hide. We will protect ourselves. And this is a biological response. Nothing wrong with hiding. The thing that I'm going to suggest is be aware of the ways that you hide. And when you hide from adversity, my premise is you're going to miss the lesson, because adversity is coming to us to teach us. And that's the purpose of our life. So when adversity happens in our life, be careful that we watch when we're hiding, because by hiding, it's a natural biological response. But at the same time, we can then miss the lesson. What do we tell kids? Don't be afraid of the dark, right? And sunlight is the best disinfectant. So when we bring it out into the open, you begin to get the lesson when you embrace it and face it. This is a basic approach that I'm using. I've done a lot of work in the trauma area. And what we learn in trauma is that eventually at some point you have to look the dragon in the eye. You got to face this stuff. And you won't learn from the adversity until you face it. And we're going to talk about the strategies of what that looks like in the context of our workplace. So here's some protective responses to adversity. And all I'm asking you to do is to recognize them. They are not bad responses. It's not like a response is good and bad, and it's not good to protect yourself. At times, we all have to recognize we need to protect ourselves, and we need to build up the capacity to protect ourselves. And let's face it, you would not survive if you didn't know how to protect yourself. Your immune system would not keep you alive if your immune system did not know how to protect yourself. All I'm asking you to do is be conscious. Be aware of when you're protecting yourself, because when you're protecting yourself and you actually don't need to protect yourself, or if you're protecting yourself out of an old belief, then what's going to happen is you're going to miss the lesson that you're here to learn. So here's some of the protective responses that come up. And, we can talk about them in relation to work. You can talk about them in relation to life. First of all, complaining. Complaining is a protective response. Far easier to complain about your boss than it is to face your boss and learn from your boss. Learn from what you are complaining about, because you're complaining about a problem. But what we're suggesting here is that problem is actually your instructor. That problem is sent to you not to get rid of and protect yourself from, but that problem is sent to you as an opportunity to learn something. So if you complain, we all need to complain some days. We all need a venting partner, but just be aware that your complaining is protecting. It's not solving anything, and it's not getting the lesson. You're simply protecting yourself. Blame is kind of in the same camp, where you blame people for your problems. You become a victim and you blame somebody else's fault, right? Push the send button. Now, you put it in a social media, internet context, and then you get adversity in your life. So easy to push that send button. I would just encourage you, before you just realize, if you push the send button impulsively, and we've all done it, whether it's an email send button, whether it's a social media send button, just recognize you aren't going to solve one thing, and you will. And if you're not solving anything, you're not learning anything. All you're doing is continually deflecting and continually distracting yourself. Anonymous survey response. I see this all the time. Far easy to put the box, I have a lousy boss. Far easier is it to check off an anonymous boss that your boss is a horrible boss. It's not engaging you. Far easier to check that box than it is to actually go to your boss or actually learn from the very boss that's teaching you. I don't know how many of you can think about the bad bosses you've had in your life, what we call bad bosses, what you call bad parents. And if you will stop and reflect, often those bosses are your best teachers if you'll stop and get the lesson. We're going to give you some strategies at how you do that. A bully, you bully people. This is a protective response. Far easier, if you get into a position of power, far easier to bully people than it is to look at ourselves and to look at our own vulnerability and our own insecurity. Far easier is it to cover up that insecurity and to cover up that self-doubt than it, far easier to, rather than facing it, just beat up everybody in the playground, right? We see this all the time. Bullies have been bullied, and bullying is a response to being bullied at some time in your life and never having learned about how to face it and deal with it. This is why, I don't want to digress too far here, but this, for those of you who are parents, this is why you never want to, or I never want to say never, but you tend not to want to just rescue kids from problems, because if they don't get the lesson, then how do they learn how to be in life without the lesson? So the key is not just, sometimes we have to protect kids, no question. Sometimes we have to step in and play a role. But if we're always just protecting them, be careful that we don't miss the lesson on the journey. Ignoring problems, just ignoring is a way of protecting. Busyness and multitasking, we all know this one, right? We just stay busy. It's an old and ironic habit of human beings to run faster when we've lost our way. Rather than facing problems, just stay busy, and then we don't have to deal with anything. Multitasking, far easier. By the way, I'm gonna present some stuff today that might stir things up for you. You may not agree with them, that's fine, but I might stir some things up, some things that might be emotionally triggering for you. Far easier to just multitask rather than actually facing what's going on in your life. Withdrawing and retreating, okay? And finally, we can just exit the relationship. And oftentimes, all of these have a good side to them in that they are protective. But make sure, we're going to give you a little exiting strategy here, or at least a framework. Whenever you exit a relationship, whether it's a personal relationship or a work relationship, if you leave your organization, make sure that you don't miss the lesson, right? Because if you miss the lesson, it'll show up in the next relationship. So it's a question. Am I distracting myself, or am I deepening myself? If you allow yourself to deepen in response to adversity, you will learn the lesson by facing the discomfort rather than deflecting and distracting as a way of avoiding. We all do it. It's human. I really want to say again, this is not a judgment. It's just an observation. When you see yourself, just ask yourself, any behavior that you're doing, ask yourself, am I avoiding? Am I distracting from facing and learning? Or am I deepening by leaning into and facing whatever it is that I'm trying to run away from? So my third premise, and I've kind of planted a seed on this one, is don't exit a relationship until you get the lesson. We all know that every relationship needs an exit. I get that. And everybody who lives in a relationship, and there's basically 3 relationships in their life. There's a relationship with a significant other or friends in your life. There's a relationship to work. And there's a relationship to yourself. Those are the primary relationships in our life. And any one of those relationships, you need to know that if I can leave this job, if I need to, I can exit this relationship. When you get on a plane, the flight attendant will tell you where the exits are. But this is an emergency. It's a last resort. You don't want to hang on to those exit doors and focus on the exit the whole flight. But you got to know in the background they're there. But just be careful. Don't exit a relationship. Or if you do exit a relationship before you get the lesson, you can just expect that you're going to get the same adversity somehow in the next relationship. It'll catch up to you. You can, as we say, you can run, but you can't hide from this stuff. Because if you buy my premise that we're here to learn. And so if you're here to learn, you're going to continually get the adversity, and you better make sure that you learn the lesson before you decide to exit the relationship. All right. So life is a novel. It's not a chapter. If your life were a book, what would be its title? And what chapter are you in now? I met a good friend in my life whose son got into drugs, bad drugs, fentanyl, bad street drugs when he was a teenager. And if you were to measure that kid's life at that time, you would say that kid is completely lost. He's off track. He's lost in his life, and he's doomed for failure. But as I always say, it's a chapter. It's not the whole novel. Don't treat your life like a chapter. Just be aware, no matter what chapter you're in, is just it's on the path. This kid ended up going to jail. He ended up on the street, and then he got into treatment, and now he's in his late 30s and runs a treatment facility for people who are drug addicts. So, and he's contributing back to the world. Now there's another chapter in his life. So be careful that we don't label, you could label any one of those chapters in this evolution of in the transformation rather from a caterpillar to a butterfly. But any one of those chapters, that second chapter just looks like mush. And you could you could pathologize that, but be careful. It's a necessary chapter to get to where you need to be in your life, right? So if your life were a book, what would be its title? I'm going to share with you the chapters in my life. This is probably something that I would call my own life, is discovering your authentic leadership. This is the whole central focus of my work. It's the central theme of everything that I do in my life, but it didn't just happen. This is a lifelong 40 years of being in this business. We're going on an adventure if you're a Hobbit fan. And this is life as an adventure. And let me assure you that life's most exciting and fulfilling adventure is the journey into ourselves, the discovery of who you truly are and who you are meant to be in this life. This is the most exciting and fulfilling adventure you can step into. And the question becomes, am I willing to step into that adventure, or am I going to hide and miss an opportunity? Okay. So learn from your life story. And this is what, for those of you who have been through my programs, my academies, understand we do some mapping of defining your key mapping out your defining moments. What were the key chapters in your life? And it's far easier to look in hindsight as we see this, and you begin to see that there's a thread. There's a thread that runs through all of these chapters in this caterpillar's life, that this caterpillar, she is meant to be one day a beautiful butterfly. And we delight, I always say, in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely acknowledge the changes that it had to go through to realize that beauty. Let your pain birth your process. Let your mess become your message. Let your obstacles be your stepping stones, not your stumbling blocks. Now, we're going to talk about the role of adversity as being a teacher. And I want to make it really clear. Adversity has a wide definition from my perspective. It could be adversity in capital letters. Peter, I don't know if you made it on the call today. I know that you were going to be here. I hope that you can stick around. Peter is a fellow who a few years ago lost his son to suicide. Now that is adversity in extra large capital letters. Let's hope that we never have to face that kind of adversity in our life. But it could be also an adversity with being bullied at work. It could be you're being micromanaged. It could be you can't depend on a team member to be accountable. Whatever you want to define as your adversity, as your obstacles, it's okay here. So whatever you're facing is totally appropriate to frame it in terms of adversity. And I know Peter has written a beautiful book in response to what he has learned from that experience. So discovering your authentic leadership. Here would be I won't say my total book. I'm going to give you 8 chapters. First of all, it's hard to fit more than 8 chapters onto one page. And I'm going to relate these chapters more to the turning points and defining moments in my life related to my career. Now, there's a whole bunch of other turning points here related to my personal relationships, related to my significant relationships. But for the sake of time and for the sake of the context of this being in work, I'm going to talk about it as a career. So I'd like you to reflect as I give you my story here of my journey and my 8 chapters of my own life. Think about it in terms of what would be your chapters. and begin to embrace the opportunity of seeing that these chapters are all necessary learning experiences that bring us into the fullness of who we're meant to be. All right. So my first chapters would begin with trauma and the wounded healer. For those of you who are people helpers, you will understand the concept of the wounded healer. Basically, what it means is that where our wound is in our life is where our gift is. And that most of us who have the capacity to help or to serve others or to be sensitive to others, that sensitivity often was born from being wounded. That had you not exposed yourself or been exposed to the horror of trauma, whatever that might be in your life, you wouldn't have the sensitivity. Or if you didn't experience trauma in your life, often our people helpers are people who have themselves been traumatized, have been wounded. And this is their gift, was what we realized. This is our gift. And it's also our curse, because if we're not careful and don't heal from that wound, the very thing that brings us into this career will also be the thing that brings us down. And this is what happened in my own life. So from my wounds as a child, I had a dream to be a veterinarian. And from the time I was probably in junior high, we had lived on a farm. I loved animals. I loved our horses, our dogs. I worked on a farm down the road, the sheep and the pigs. And I just loved animals generally. And I wanted to be a vet. So I saved up for a year. I flew to Saskatchewan, the University of Saskatchewan. Back in those days, there was only 2 vet schools in Canada. And I flew there. I went to their open house and I found out all about, I talked to professors and I just got all keyed up to be a veterinarian. And then I got to university and I failed organic chemistry. And you know what? You are not going to make it to vet school if you can't get through organic chemistry. And I could not for the life of me get through organic chemistry. And what happened was that this is a second part of the same chapter, is that I met a guy named Dr. Price. And he was a professor of child development at the university, and I took an optional class because I was interested in kids. And he turned me on to child development. I got an early childhood education degree, went back to did my graduate work in family therapy, and I was a family therapist for 10 years back in the 80s. Now, that was my next career, really. My first career really was family therapy. What happened, however, is that I got burned out. And because of my trauma and my woundedness, I became what I call a helpaholic. I just had to help, and I did not have any boundaries. I didn't have any clarity around how to say no. I was a great helper, but it was at the cost of myself. I got into addiction and I suffered depression, and I had 2 very significant episodes of clinical depression, and some of it was situational, some of it was biological from a response from what my dad had dealt with. And I went into a real tailspin. And this would have been in the late 80s. Now, what happened from that is that I got some therapy and I began to work through my burnout a little bit. And I had a residue of growth and some work, and then I changed careers. And what I decided to do, I was starting to do presentations for parents, and I ended up getting business leaders into my parenting talks. And so I gave up my family therapy practice. First of all, the burnout, I couldn't go back to it. And I was working alone. I had my own practice in Lethbridge. And what I did was I changed careers and went into the OD, for those of you who don't know, is organizational development work. So I went into the leadership development. I worked with cultures. I went into business with 2 other organizational development experts who really helped me understand the business of business and helped me understand the organizational side. And then I brought the people side into that. And that's really what I've been doing since 1989. But the thing that was a turning point for me was the next chapter, where we wrote a book on accountability. And I began to integrate all the values that my parents instilled in me. And this was 20 years after I left home. I don't know how many of you can realize how smart your parents get years after you leave home, because they sure didn't know anything at the time. But I can tell you that my focus on accountability, and I really began to understand the whole notion of integrity and the whole notion of showing up in life and keeping your promises and really sharpening this. And I really launched my whole career in the 90s around the whole notion of accountability. And what that did was it took me into realizing the gap in my own life, that I was not operating my life with integrity. I could not show up, and I drifted back into depression. I drifted back into addiction, and I realized that I was not fully integrating everything in my life that I was teaching. And the gap was just growing wider and wider the more that I taught. And the interesting thing is that my dad, my mom was the yang person in my family. She was the one with the energy. With the courage and the backbone, and she started her own business, and she was really a generation ahead of herself. My dad was the soft, sensitive guy. He was the one who struggled with depression. And I really struggled with really finding my voice, with really knowing who I was, with taking a stand, with planting my flag. And working in these masculine driven, we worked with all the oil companies in Calgary in the 90s and took our accountability work, working with these masculine driven management systems and teaching people about accountability. It actually impacted my depressive nature. It was actually really good for me to be in an environment that was really tough and insensitive to people, because I was overly sensitive. And now I'm bringing the balance back and starting to realize, you know what, I got to start to, be definite about my goals and be clear on where I'm going, and be clear on what it means to have integrity. And that's what led me to having another breakdown. And then I went into, and when it started a recovery program, but it was really the teaching accountability in my work that actually was an impetus for me to start to realize I need to go and get some help, and I need to start a recovery program, and I need to get into that program. And that's what led to personal integrity and the relationship between integrity and accountability. And I think I've got a point here, that whole point around accountability and keeping your promise, and how that relates to integrity, and how integrity is integral to your self-respect. I now spend probably 20 hours of my week volunteering each week, working with addicts. And one of the things that I realize is that what we're recovering from is our integrity. At the beginning of a day, if you say, I'm not going to drink today, and then by 4:00 in the afternoon, you're drunk, you have no integrity. And so what you do is you create a program around this to say, you know what, you don't have an option. You're not going to drink today. And what that does is, at the end of the day, when you have a day of sobriety, you realize you got some self-respect because you got integrity. And you say, you know what, I'm going to keep a promise to myself. And that's all that started that whole journey around understanding this in relation to accountability. So the very companies that are very difficult to work with were actually a learning for me. And this is what I would like you to grasp, is this: whatever you're coming up against, and maybe you're dealing with an insensitive, masculine driven company that doesn't know how to connect with people, there's an opportunity. You're there for a reason. We don't just end up in places by accident. We're there for a reason, that this is an opportunity to learn. I learned in my accountability work, for example, the law of the echo, that whatever you give out into the world will come back to you tenfold. If you want more love in a relationship, be more loving. Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. Declare your emotional independence so that your moods aren't dependent on somebody else's behavior. What you do is you want more accountability, be more accountable. You want better customer service, be a better customer servant. Serve the customer service person and see if you might not get better customer service. And give what you expect. I learned that whole thing by teaching about accountability. And I learned that from some of the best clients that we worked with. And then what I evolved from there is to say, listen, my work has to go beyond accountability. I don't want on my headstone to be written that I was accountable. Accountability is a great tool. It's the foundation of your life. It's not the living room of your life. You don't mess with the foundation, but it's the foundation. But then what you do is build it from that. And that foundation then was built on authentic leadership. It's about finding my voice and really bringing my voice to the world. And that's one of the reasons why I do these webinars, is because I want to bring my voice more fully to the world. So that would be my book. And by the way, it's not finished yet. I'm just now moving into another chapter where we're downsizing, and I'm examining my values, and where am I going to spend the next chapter of my life, and where do my academies fit into that? And I'm going to continue to speak. I want to speak less, but I want to, be more focused on so I'm in a transition myself right now. So my book is not finished yet. I got future chapters, but I've been reflecting on, I think one day in the next year or two, I'm going to write my autobiography, but this would be just related to my career. And I want you to see how my career has been helpful and necessary as a tool to help me grow and develop and learn in each of these chapters, that my career had an impact on that. So reflect on what that would look like from your perspective. Where has your career been helpful to you? All right, now what I want to leave is some strategy here. And I want to just give you 3 specific strategies for how you deal with that. I want to make this very practical. So number 1 is assess your situation. So what do I mean? What do I mean by that? Where is your current pain point? Now, that pain point, again, it could be in the middle of a major loss right now. But in relation to the context of work, maybe you just got laid off. Maybe you're dealing with a bully who's a boss who's a bully, rather. Maybe you're dealing with an insensitive colleague. Whatever your pain point is, that is where the door is open for your learning. Because again, this has been sent to you as an opportunity to learn something. What is your greatest frustration? These are just some sample questions. What's your greatest frustration at work? What do you complain about when you go home at night? What are you doing to hide? And do you want to survive this, or do you want to grow from this? This is a fundamental decision. So just take an inventory of your own career right now and your own work life, and just ask yourself, where is there right now? Maybe you're exhausted right now at work. Maybe that's your pain point. We talked on our team the other day about mental tiredness. And this is actually, it became a theme. It's what I'm going to do in my next webinar. But I'm just noticing everywhere I go today, people are exhausted. So this could be your pain point, is to stop and look at exhaustion, tiredness. Now, in part, I think most of the world's work gets done by tired people. So in part, it's okay to be tired. But what is that tiredness opening up for you? What is there an opportunity? What is asking to be born here? Is that you begin to ask these questions. It's just pinpointed. What are you frustrated with? And how much have you been hiding? And how much do you need to face what you have been hiding from? All right. Embrace adversity. So that's the first strategy. It's just get a clear roadmap. We say when we're lost to just stop and get your bearings. And that's what assessing your situation is. Without judgment, just assess your situation. And maybe your work is in your family right now. Maybe that is your work. It may be paid or unpaid work, but whatever your situation is, take an assessment and get an honest inventory. Now, embrace adversity. Now, what do we mean by embracing adversity? Learn the alchemy. True human beings know the moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the door will open. So notice how you've been fighting against adversity, your troubles, whatever you want to call them. I just use them all interchangeably. Your problems, your challenges, your troubles, your pain points. Notice your lack of acceptance of those. Now, again, we're all going to push this away. We're all going to run away from this. It's a natural human response, but just recognize that, hey, I am missing a growth opportunity by resisting continually. And do I really need to protect myself? And what am I protecting myself from? It's an old belief. For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must be completely undone. The shell breaks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. But for somebody who understands growth, you begin to understand this needs to open up. But we need to completely become undone. Now, I'm going to show you a short little 3-minute video. Those of you who have been in my longer leadership programs have seen this video. This is a Jay Shetty video. And I don't really like his assessment at the end, but I'm just going to demonstrate adversity for you and demonstrate what would this person do to embrace adversity in their context. And it's an extreme adversity that not many of us would want to face. And some of us may have had to face this. It's an extreme case, but I want to show you, I want to use it as a model, as an example, as a case study, if you will, to how to walk yourself through by learning by embracing adversity. So just, yeah, I'll just play it and see. By the way, I'm going to backtrack. I just want to give you the heads up. It doesn't end well. And so what we're trying to get here is the lesson that comes from this tragedy. Okay.
Dave, I'm not sure if everyone has volume. I'm not getting any volume. So if anybody just wants to confirm in the chat room, that would be awesome.
You know what? I think that might be on me because I didn't push share sound. So thank you, Kristen, for interrupting.
Okay, yes, the others could not hear it. So we're all in the same boat.
You bet.
Thank you for fixing that.
I'm going to just take me a minute to get recentered here. Hang on. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. All right, that should resolve it.
It's very, very quiet and breaking up a little bit. If there's a volume setting, we can.
Yeah. It's still not coming through, Kristen?
It's just ever so quiet, like not enough to really hear what they're saying, though.
All right. I will keep working at it. Bear with me. Grant me some grace here. Hang on. See, this is an opportunity to learn some self-patience.
I think we can all relate to having a little technical challenge in our lives.
You see, this is one of the things that I continually learn is to be patient with myself because I have this need to have everything be perfect. Now, that goes off. Kristen, you let me know if this doesn't work.
Moment of truth. We're good. We're good.
Hey.
Go ahead.
I wanted to go for brunch on Saturday, so I was thinking we could book something. There's this really nice restaurant.
Yeah.
I thought we could go.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah. Yeah. 20 minutes. Pen.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. See you later, yeah?
Bye.
Okay. Yeah,
Love
okay.
you.
Be there.
Mr. Clark, is that Mr. Daniel Clark?
Yeah.
This is Dr. Cohen from Kensington and Chelsea Hospital.
Yeah.
Calling to inform you that this morning your wife was involved in a serious road incident. She passed away en route to the hospital, and I regret to say there was absolutely nothing more we could have done.
I hope this never happens to anyone, but the harsh truth is that it does. Often we're so engrossed in our work that we forget to value, appreciate, and recognize those that we're actually working for. We get so wrapped up in our own lives that we forget the people that make up our life. I know people who regret the last words they said, and others who never really got to share how they genuinely feel. Whatever is taken for granted will eventually be taken away. That's when we end up missing the most the person that we least appreciated. Because we never think the last time will be the last time. We think we have more, but we don't. Focus on those that you really love.
Okay, so we could process that, and that's one learning that could come out of that he needs to put more priority on the people in his life. That could be something that he's learning. But I'm going to also suggest there's a whole mindfulness, like he's not present. And that there's a lesson here that says, you know what, I'm not present to life. I'm distracted. By the way, I have to tell you, there will always, anytime there's a loss, there will always be guilt. Death brings guilt. You can't avoid that. But there's also regrets can open us up to say, what do I need to learn from this? So how do you embrace this? How would this, if this individual came to me for some coaching, how would I help him embrace it? I would not say to him, there's a great opportunity for you to learn here. Let's embrace a growth opportunity. It might be a right response if he came to me a year after this. But at first, you embrace it by just embracing the chaos. Here's the 7 stages of managing and navigating transitions. So you have a familiar, then you come across adversity. You will always go into a period of chaos, then reflection, then decision, then you rebuild and you get new possibilities and new attachments. And this cycle will go through the rest of our lives. So the first step is to embrace the chaos, embrace the feelings that go with the adversity. So what those feelings might be: loss, fear, self-doubt, uncertainty, betrayal, regret, anger. Embrace the emotions, lean into those feelings, and accept that those feelings come with adversity. So when I'm suggesting that adversity is a learning opportunity, don't think that you're going to jump right into the opportunity and miss the feelings, because the emotions that go through real chaos are actually the pathway to deepening and to learning. You'll miss the lesson if you avoid the emotion. That this is from all my research is such that you have to embrace whatever feelings are coming up for you. Don't avoid that. So just recognize it, and just recognize there's times when we stay busy during chaos, when we complain during chaos. All of those natural human responses for avoiding it are all part of the journey. But recognizing, oh, I'm avoiding it. What do I need to face that I have been protecting myself from? Then you reach a period of reflection. You have to go through the chaos. People have to, complain before they build. They have to grieve before you build. So you have to go through the chaos. But then what moves you forward is that when you begin to move into a reflection stage, where you begin to say, what do I need to learn from this adversity? What is wanting to be born? What's wanting to be born is I need to be more compassionate in the world. I need to reach into my compassionate heart. I need to be softer. I need more patience. This is why, I got thrown into a little adversity in our presentation today. And I would like to think that I'm more patient with myself than if that would have happened 2 years ago. And just, this is where work can bring me a little bit of patience. So and by the way, patience is not, because I get very anxious when I can't control something. And that anxiety will get put in terms of pressure around me. And this is a big learning for me, is learning how to practice being patient. So guess what? Adversity comes because I still am looking for opportunities to practice more patience. And I appreciated Kristen's support there to recognize, because this is one of her strengths, is bringing patience and balance into our relationship, onto our team. Maybe I need to learn to be tougher. Maybe I need to be clearer. Maybe I need to get some backbone. Maybe I need to really sort out my values. Maybe there's some problems here that need to be solved. Maybe I need to set better boundaries. What are the other learnings? And this is the reflective period where you take the time, whatever the adversity is that you're facing, and go through a process of examining what you need to learn. What do I learn? What do I need to learn from this adversity? What support is required? What decisions need to be made? Okay. I got to share with you, just in our academy last week, some incredible people. And one of the participants was sharing that what she needed to learn, she was being bullied in her work and was being disrespected in her work. And she came up with, the whole process was coming up with a line of how she could respond to this. And so this is what she learned. She learned to write this. She wrote this down. This conversation is no longer respectful or professional. I do not appreciate the way I've been spoken to, nor do I deserve it. I'm going to table this conversation, and no sooner than tomorrow will I be available to revisit your requirements in a professional manner. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Goodbye. So this was a response to being disrespected. And she learned from the adversity to capture this boundary that she needed to have. This is what she learned from her experience. And then you make a decision. And decisions is what will change your life, change your story. Hey, I've had a story that's going on about how awful it is to work here. I'm just going to change my story. I'm going to let go of blame, fear, resentments, change your attitude. Go from enraged to engaged, change jobs. You know what? It's time. I need to leave this organization. I need to leave my career. I need to change the way you're doing your job. I need to reach out for help. Each of these will change the trajectory. And if you just stay in chaos and protect yourself through complaining and blaming and pushing the send buttons, you'll never get to what the reflections you've made, nor the decisions that you need to make in order to turn this into a learning opportunity. You must, as Joseph Campbell said, you must be willing to let go of the life you've planned so that you can have the life that you were meant to live. This is the whole reflection and decision process. And then finally take action. So I'll leave with a call to action. So here's 3 calls to action. I'll give you a 4th one. Reflect on your life story. When you leave here, take some time. Again, it's very easy in our technology world where we are so in love with our devices and so in love with meeting people's needs and being accountable that we'll just leave here and just get back to the demands of your life. And it's very easy to do that. But I would ask you over the weekend to take some time and actually reflect on what your life story is. What is that thread that has run through your career that has guided you to the sense of purpose? Assess your situation. Go through those pain points. What's the pain point? What's the frustration? Assess where you're at right now. Sit and get your bearings. Where are you at? Search for the right conditions for growth. I just want to mention this. In terms of conditions. One of my mentors, Virginia Satir, who is a world-renowned family therapist, said, no plants ever grow better because you demand that they do so or because you threaten them. Plants grow only when they have the right conditions and are given the proper care. Cultivating the right environment and the proper nourishment for plants and people as well is a matter of continual investigation and vigilance. So as we say, when a flower doesn't bloom, you change the environment in which it grows. You don't fix the flower. So you might want to examine, what are your conditions? What are your conditions for growth? What, you want to learn in your environment. So this is the whole topic of psychological safety and creating an environment. If you're a team leader, are you creating the conditions for people to learn in? Because I'll promise you, if people are afraid and they're protecting themselves, they're not going to be learning. If you want the workplace to be a classroom, you got to create the right conditions. And you have to know what conditions those are in order for your own growth. What conditions do you need and this is maybe in the learning. How can I create the right conditions here for myself to learn? How can I create conditions for my team if I'm in a positional leadership role? And then embrace the hard stuff. Welcome the uncomfortable feelings. I'm not saying create the uncomfortable feelings, but when they come, be honest. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's, maybe it's sadness, maybe it's fear, maybe it's self-doubt, maybe it's regret, maybe it's anger. If you haven't dealt with some of those primary feelings, it may go to anger. Whatever those feelings are, welcome them. Take the time for reflection. Take the time to be with those emotions and then make the decisions to follow through. What decisions do I need to make that will help me grow from this experience? And then I want to end with ask for help. I will certainly, if some things got triggered today, if you need some support, feel free to reach out to Val at any time. I think all of you got the email confirming this from Val. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give you any support that you might need. We offer a peer mentoring program for those of you who want to go deeper into this material. I certainly want to be a resource here for you. I hope that this presentation today has raised some reflections for you, provoke you a little bit, made you think a little bit, and given you a few strategies around how to turn not just the workplace, although that was the context that I mostly focused on, but life in general. How do we turn life into a classroom? If you want to go further with this as well, I would invite you to join in with Haley, my daughter. We do a podcast called the Leaders Navigator podcast on any of your platforms there. And our next webinar will be, make a note of this, on Friday, June 21st, because the end of June can be so hectic for so many people. We're doing it a week early this year, and it's fostering well-being in times of mental fatigue. We'll set you up for success to enter into the summer. Folks, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this has been useful. Please feel free to stick around, and I would love to have a dialogue with those of you who are able to make the time. Thanks again.